Hello, everyone. Welcome to Chapter 6 of Introduction to Global Health. I'm Jeremy Whitaker. Today we're going to be talking about model programs in Haiti and Rwanda. So let's dive in. Now, I'm going to talk mostly about Haiti because the successes in Haiti were basically repeated in Rwanda. Now, again, they are oceans apart and completely different settings. However, the infrastructure was virtually non-existent in both places. So again, they have a lot in common in that way. So again, we talk about basically things are rough in Haiti. By the time Partners in Health gets invited in, this is a colony that started off poor and remained poor, and shot themselves in the foot on many occasions with dictators and poorly distributing resources. The U.S. got repeatedly involved in their affairs, even occupying the country for a period of time, supporting dictators down there. So basically, they've had a rough go. So bringing you up to modern times, you have little, not even health infrastructure at all outside of, again, the major cities. There's 25 doctors per 100,000, which is about 1/10 of what we have in the U.S. Life expectancy is about 15, 20 years less than the United States, and about 1 in 5 people has HIV. It's a pretty rotten situation. The per capita income, depending on where you read it in the book, starts off at less than $1 a day, goes up as high as about $2 a day. Now, this is important later in the book because they talk about people not wanting to pay, an 80-cent copay. Well, that's a day's wage. So that's actually fairly expensive. It'd be if you made $50,000 a year here, that'd be $136 to go see the doctor. So again, keep that proportionality in mind. So again, about half of people have access to clean water, probably not in their home, but where they can go to a community area and get from a pipe, get clean water. About 10% is a modern sanitation, flush toilets. So we're talking about 1 in 10 people in the country, mostly in the cities, have, again, flush toilets. Over half of children are malnourished, and about half of them are in school, mostly because they are trying to work, bring in money, and get money for food. So it's this kind of, you have this cycle where people aren't going to school, so they can't really advance. There aren't opportunities anyway, so why go to school? And nobody has food. And some of that is U.S. policy and subsidized agriculture in the United States, which they can import food cheaper than they can make it at home, so it kills the local farmers, which is the only industry they have. So looking on, Partners in Health kind of gets in, and they really kick off with TB. And so they open in a place, I believe, called Kange. It's up to you. I don't know how to pronounce it. And so this story of these water refugees, people who were forced off of their land a generation ago when they built a hydroelectric dam. Now, again, about the only industry they have is farming. And when your farm's underwater, then you have nothing. And again, it talks about structural violence. We talked about, I think, back in Chapter 1, and the idea that your environment does harm unto you. So the way that, your society is set up causes you to be malnourished, causes you to have to take dangerous jobs. And then that ties into this story of, again, Asefi and her story of this kind of structural violence of, well, the only thing she had going for her is that she was reasonably attractive, and so she was basically forced to become the mistress of a captain to help feed herself and her family. She got HIV, spread HIV to her, her later was going to be her husband and probably her child, and died of tuberculosis and AIDS. So it was a really depressing story, but kind of shows that there weren't opportunities. In your societies without education and upward mobility, you're really kind of forced by your circumstances. So this ties into endemic tuberculosis. That basically, again, the book talks about how it's been there, it's been around for a couple hundred years, high TB rates, and then you have AIDS. And all of a sudden, AIDS, which weakens your immune system, and TB, which can then overpower what's remaining of your immune system. And so really, again, one study showed that 45% of TB patients tested were HIV positive, so about half. And in one slum, healthy adults, 70% had TB, and another 15% had HIV and didn't know it. So again, you have these problems of, these people don't know, even if they know they have TB, they can't really afford treatment or they can't stay on the treatment. And it said, and that's our next bullet, that they don't finish. That I believe they said only about 7% of people finished their TB treatments. So then you're building drug-resistant tuberculosis because, again, you don't have clinical access, money to pay for medication. So even if you're diagnosed, it's very unlikely you're going to get all the medication you need cleared out of your system and keep healthy. And so then on page 151 is a really great plan that Partners in Health did to basically help people with TB, and it addressed a lot of the structural barriers. It talks about donkey rental, and that's what people needed. They needed, to be able to pay for a donkey to help carry them and maybe their stuff into the town with a clinic. They needed food. Again, these barriers that they had to, waive, these 80-cent copays, stuff like that. So really just these small barriers, but they needed a lot of help with them. They also need community health workers to basically talk to people about, well, this is what you need to do. This is why. People who lived and worked in their community and maybe, people that they grew up with or they knew their kids. So again, community people who could kind of act as that liaison between the person and the health system. And in fact, you're seeing that in the United States now with clinical care coordination and these care coordinators helping people, help navigate your insurance and your doctor and your pharmacist and your different specialist and what is it they need to do. So again, that model really kind of starts right around here and is expanding out across the world. And then, of course, page 153 shows that the people who had, again, these help with structural barriers, 100% were disease-free and survived. Versus the other group who were further away and didn't get all the extras, about half died. So sad, but again, a huge difference in the two groups. And so they're working on TB's kind of the bread and butter, but then HIV comes. And so when HIV testing was, again, first available, only 20% of people agreed to it, but it makes sense because if there's no treatment, why bother to get tested? I'm positive. Okay, but you can't do anything. So people just didn't want to know they're positive and going to die if there was no treatment. So again, it makes sense. Only 20% of people agreed to be tested. But again, once you have effective interventions on site, AZT and drugs to pass, to prevent the passing of HIV to unborn children, the number jumps to 90%. Again, I can do something about my HIV. Okay, please, I'll be tested. Also, their clinic in Cambridge, transitions to a hospital. They add it on, and what started off as a humble clinic becomes a full-fledged hospital. But again, Partners in Health really proves that it is possible to treat HIV effectively using their kind of TB model of outreach in people and addressing structural barriers, and that's what makes the whole thing go. So then they're so successful, they set up a second location, and they end up setting up, after the earthquake, a 300-bed world-class facility, again, at another location. Now, just to keep in mind, Allen Hospital has 201 beds. So this is like a third larger than Allen. So we're talking a very large, modern hospital out in rural, very poor Haiti. So that brings us to Rwanda. And the first 2 pages of Rwanda are incredibly depressing, but please read them because it basically talks about how these colonial influences pitted these two groups together, which at one point finally erupted into genocide. And 1 million people died in about 100 days. I believe the book said that between 14 to 17% of males killed somebody. So it wasn't just like one band; it was everybody. So almost 1 in 6 men killed somebody during that time. And so then one of the groups ends up reorganizing, coming back, taking over, and saying enough. And they got rid of the Hutu and Tutsi labels. And they started to move on as a country. So at the behest of the country and the Clinton Foundation, Partners in Health moves into Rwanda, and they can move into an area with 500,000 people and not a single doctor. And so they get spooled up within 3 years. They've tested 80,000 people for HIV. They're treating people. I don't know how many people the book doesn't say, but it says 98% of those have suppressed viral loads, which is another way of saying people are taking their medication. They're coming in, they're getting the meds, they're staying on the meds. there was some struggle between, they had this national kind of health insurance issue where basically Partisan Health just paid the copays. Instead of fighting with the government over charging those copays, they basically just charged them and paid it themselves and refunded the money. And again, it was such a success that they opened clinics that did similar work in a couple other African countries. So looking at the assignments for Chapter 6, or at least the Module 3, again, there's an article about patent laws and HIV, what Brazil did in the mid-90s. And then Week 6 discussion board, there is a NGO summary from Chapter 6 that you're going to cut and paste over. And then the homework for Chapter 5 talks about the cost of AIDS treatment and what is it in the U.S. now. And then, of course, Assignment 6 is the chapter name checks several successful NGOs and the work that they're doing. And so each one of you, I assigned you an NGO to talk more about. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you all soon.